Top O of the morning, Dan and Amy, and we have a number of legal matters to cover with our next guest, Andy McCarthy. But I want to start with Hunter Biden. I just feel like this shouldn't be let go, even if that's the disposition of the DOJ and the FBI and the political class in D.C. and half of the electorate. I just don't think so. His hagiographic interview over the weekend on CBS Sunday Morning, CBS helping Hunter try and sell copies of his memoir, Beautiful Things, on the pertinent points, which are not his addiction, rather his business dealings. Here's what he had to say about accepting that board position on Burisma, having no background in the energy sector.
I don't think I made a mistake in taking the spot on the board. I think I made a mistake in terms of underestimating the way in which it would be used against me.
But you must have seen the optics. Even back then, you must have, how could you not have foreseen that this was going to look bad?
Because I really didn't. I'm being as honest with you as I possibly can. All I know is that not one investigative body, not one serious journalist has ever come to the conclusion that I did anything wrong or that my father did anything wrong.
Serious journalist isn't an oxymoron.
Yeah, these days. And on his laptop, that was discovered, could be, could not be, maybe, no idea.
Was that your laptop?
For real, I don't know.
I know, but you know that's this.
I really don't know. Okay. The answer is
you don't know yes or no if the laptop.
I don't have any
yours.
Idea. I have no idea.
So could have been yours.
Of course, certainly. There could be a laptop out there that was stolen from me. There could be that I was hacked. It could be that it was Russian intelligence. It could be that it was stolen from me.
And you didn't drop off a laptop to be repaired in Delaware?
Not that I remember at all. So, we'll see.
For more on this, Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, Manhattan, contributing editor at National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, putting your former federal prosecutor hat on, how much fun would you have cross-examining Hunter Biden if you were still a trial attorney?
Oh, well, he's an imbecile, but I think it's kind of that's a side issue. What's really disgusting is the media. I mean, she's asking yes or no, is it your laptop? And he rolls off the reasons that it could have been. All right, let's start with this document. Is this your document? Mm-hmm. I mean, why do you never get to, is this your document? And by the way, who's the big guy? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's right. I just
obvious, right?
I look at this stuff and I just think this is much more about the media than it is about Hunter Biden. They took something that was obviously authentic, that the Biden people never claimed was inauthentic. They never said that a single document wasn't his. They went with this idiotic Russian disinformation thing, which, as I pointed out at the time, even if it were true, which there was no evidence, that the Russians had somehow hacked his computer and put out stolen information, that wouldn't make it inauthentic. That wouldn't make it not his. And at that point, the relevant question was, is this your documents, number one? And the overarching compelling question, which nobody seemed to want to ask, including, by the way, the Trump campaign, which couldn't articulate this simple piece. And you had Trump out there like screaming about the Justice Department, screaming about the FBI. But here's the question, politically and corruption-wise, et cetera. Why is it that every time Barack Obama, as president, put Joe Biden in charge of foreign relations with respect to a troublesome government like China, Russia, or Ukraine, people in those countries connected to those regimes thought it was expedient to pay Hunter Biden millions of dollars. I mean, that's the question.
Yeah, but did Hunter Biden share those profits? Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting. If I was that report, I would have asked, did you share those profits with your dad and with your uncle?
Right, but let's start with did you get them?
Right.
But you're absolutely right. And the way you do that, Amy, is you walk them through the document. Like this guy,
Bobulinski.
Tony Bobulinski, has already corroborated that the document we're talking about matches up with the details of the transaction he worked on. So what you do is you take this document, which is all you know, if he denies that it's his document, he'll look ridiculous. So, he probably tries like, no, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But you walk him through the details of it and ask him who the big guy is. But first you say, this is you, right? And this James, that's your Uncle Jim Biden, right? And then who's the big guy? And let him answer the question. Now, he may give an absurd answer, but at least you've tried. At least you've walked them through it, and people can make up their own mind.
No more absurd than him smoking Parmesan cheese, thinking it was crack, I suppose. Yeah, it would be. It would be nice. And again, why this is the pertinent part, not just because Hunter Biden is a security threat just by walking around, but number two is because going back to Bob Alinsky's testimony, going back to some of what we have heard from Hunter Biden allegedly on a phone call, is that he implicates Joe Biden in lying about this from the beginning and perhaps being cut in on deals. And that matters since he's the president of the United States, doesn't it?
How is it? Yeah. How is it conceivable that people are cashing in on your name who happen to be your son and your brother for 30 years and you don't know? I mean, there's no reason to think that Biden isn't completely informed about this. And let's remember, we're talking about somebody who for 40 years is a complete mediocre hack who's been wrong on every single issue of national and international importance. We're not talking about like we're dealing with rocket scientists here, right? So you got like tons of money rolling to his closest relatives, and he is in these positions of influence, and they're clearly cashing in on it. This isn't like they turn this into something that's like complex and sophisticated. It looks pretty straightforward to me, which is why I think it's a media corruption story more than we know who the Bidens are. That's there's nothing new under the sun with respect to the Bidens, and I suppose there's nothing really new with respect to the media. But the media angle of this is much more important than the Bidens.
Well, what about the Department of Justice? If there is this investigation that has been going on for more than a year, as was reported prior to the election. Not to mention the Durham investigation and whatever netherworld that currently operates. What about those reaching some sort of conclusion in a timely fashion?
Yeah, Dan, and also let's not memory hole yet, although the media will try, this thing that emerged in the last couple of weeks where he clearly lied on his federal firearms background check, which in and of itself is a felony. And that one, unlike some of the other stuff we're talking about, that one's a pretty black and white case, it looks like to me. Now, the China corruption stuff, a lot of that is financial transactions that happened while Biden was out of office. And the issue there, I think, is probably going to turn out to be less criminal than sleazy and, less of a black and white criminal problem than a national security issue, which is a profound national security issue. But the thing like the background check, is, did you lie on the form or not? And I have to say, if this was the Trump people in the Mueller investigation, the case would already be over. So I'm not holding my breath, waiting for the Biden Justice Department to indict Hunter Biden. I just, that's not the way the Obama Justice Department worked. The Obama Justice Department was a very politicized outfit. I think we're already seeing that the Biden Justice Department is the Obama Justice Department Part 2. And the first thing they did coming in was drop the case against, was it Yale that they dropped the case against?
Yeah. The discrimination suits.
I mean,
yeah.
It's just going to be it's going to be as politicized as it ever was. And if I'm right about that, then don't hold your breath waiting for the Hunter indictment.
Well, sure. Obviously, Hunter is not concerned enough about being queried about it that he won't go on a publicity tour to sell his memoir. So that tells you something. Pretty ballsy for a guy under federal investigation. Maybe he knows something. I want to get to another topic, to Major League Baseball. And, President Trump and others on the conservative side, of course, called for boycotts of the boycotters, effectively going after the corporations that are falling in liege with the Biden administration, Major League Baseball pulling out, and these other corporations, repeating essentially Ilhan Omar-esque rhetoric. With respect to Major League Baseball, rather than boycotting, although sure, use your dollars where you get value for them. rather than boycotting, what about revisiting Major League Baseball's antitrust status? I know we've talked about this intermittently before, but it seems to me that and Gorsuch has essentially, in a previous opinion about 5 years ago, sort of indicated that there's a lot of law that runs counter to Major League Baseball continuing to enjoy an antitrust exemption. Why not get Portland Mavericks style independent baseball teams out there on the hustings at the major league level, even, and move to litigate Major League Baseball's antitrust status, their exemption?
Look, Dan, I'm all for it. I think we should do every single. I don't understand why they still have a antitrust exemption. I don't understand why, given the billions of dollars that they are making, and a lot of what we've seen in recent days is explainable by the amazing income that they expect to get from the streaming rights in China, of all places, where the voting rights aren't that strong, as it happens. But in that, given that that's the background that we're dealing with, why are taxpayers in cities around the country still building stadiums for these guys on bond issues where they have to pay the taxes on them for years and years? That's ridiculous. I don't think they should have. They have such a money making thing going, and I'm like you guys. I'm not against anyone making money, but God bless them if they figure out something to make the market work for them. And I love baseball. I've had a love affair with it for more years than I care to say, but I don't see why the government should be helping them at all, and why they should get advantages that aren't available to other people. And if they're going to play these kind of games like they're playing here, where the people they're crushing here, the media doesn't want to talk about this either, but it's like the hot dog guy who isn't going to have a couple of days of employment at the All-Star game. That's who they're hurting. They're hurting the little guy in Atlanta making a statement on the basis, for the benefit of woke politics, and they're doing it with public money and assets that really aren't theirs in the first place. And they're clearly doing it to court favor with the Biden administration because they have a lot going. The MLB does. They have a lot going with China, and they have a lot going with other international streams of revenue. So
yeah, it's $100 million. It's $100 million in lost revenue, and you're right. The people are going to be hurting for that. Now, are you turned off?
$100 million just on the All-Star game.
Just on the All-Star game, right? But Mr. McCarthy, are you turned off of baseball now? I mean, I read your piece when you've been in 1968. You said you got the thrill of a lifetime for a 9-year-old. By watching, going to the Mets game and watching your stars, but are you still going to be watching baseball after this?
Well, first of all, I mean, now you've outed my age, so there's that.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Although she was referencing a piece you wrote,
right?
So,
no,
Sure.
I thought she was referring to the fact that I must be senile and we should check the details. But no, look,
you're also old enough to remember when it was a thrill to go to a Mets game. So.
Yeah, that's long ago and far away too. But look, I know myself too well, and I'm too in love with it to say I'm not going to watch because I've tried to do that before and I end up watching, but I'm not going to spend a dime on it. And there's a lot of people like me. I think baseball is losing their younger demographic, so it's people like me that they need to think about. I'm not saying that's because I'm an extraordinary fan. It's because I'm a fan, and I'm like one of these people who can spend money on it and historically do. So if you want to politicize my respite from politics, then, I'm not going to be the same kind of fan anymore. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
I think you're right about that. Of course, as the play, though, as you referenced, like with the NBA, is not the domestic market. It's the Chinese market, which makes it even all the more cynical, their disgusting rent-seeking behavior. And I include LeBron James and the sort of hush-hush about whether or not Space Jam 2 is going to get wide distribution in China. But I digress. I wanted to get to something else that you talked about, too, on the legal front that you've written about. I've been reading your coverage of the Chauvin trial. And, I think in the minds of most, it's a fait accompli. Maybe the only debate is whether it will be third or second degree murder, his conviction. But you have written at least one piece suggesting that some of the prosecution's witnesses have not lived up to their advanced billing in terms of helping the prosecutors, the state's case, including that retired EMT who testified last week. What's your handle on what has transpired in that trial to date?
Well, I think it's very uphill for Chauvin, in part for the reasons that you've explained. It all comes down to the jury, of course. So even though we think it's a fait accompli, the 12 people still have to decide it, and the prosecutor's got to get all of them. If Chauvin plants doubt in the mind of one person, you end up getting a mistrial, which is always beneficial to the defense in the long run. But here's why I think it's uphill for Chauvin, and it should be. What the state's best evidence shows is that they kept him in a prone position on the street, with Chauvin keeping his knee on the guy's neck for 9.5 minutes. That's what they keep telling the jury, 9-9. That's the most important thing, 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And they obviously want to concentrate on that because Floyd violently resisted arrest beforehand, and they don't want to talk about that. But the problem I think Chauvin's really going to have is that the guy had no pulse and was not breathing for the last 4.5 minutes. And even a minute after the ambulance showed up, he kept his knee on the guy's neck. And there doesn't look like there's any good reason for having done that. He wants to convince them that they were afraid that the guy would suddenly come to and get violent again. But when you have a guy who's not breathing and doesn't have a pulse and is handcuffed behind the back, their training, it looks like, is to turn him over on his side so that at least
Right.
his airway passages are better open. And you try to treat him, especially if he's got no pulse, they're trained to start compressions, and they didn't do any of that. So is it a criminal thing, or is it negligence, which is manslaughter? I think the last 4.5 minutes is very hard for Chauvin.
He is Andy McCarthy, contributor at NRO, former federal prosecutor, Southern District of New York, and best-selling author of Ball of Collusion. Andy, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.